Hi everyone. I hope you are all doing well. I trust that every viewer is in good health and high spirits today. Our topic today takes us deep into a world we see every day but rarely think about. The origins of color pigments, the shades that fill paintings, decorate temples, and brighten fabrics all have hidden beginnings. Long before chemical factories and commercial dyes, humans learned to pull color out of the earth. Plants and even animals. Ancient artists didn't just paint, they experimented like early scientists. They ground stones into fine powders, boiled leaves to release their dye, and discovered that some insects could produce brilliant reds unlike anything else in nature. One of the earliest pigments was red ochre. It came from iron oxide-rich soil and has been found on artifacts dating back over 70,000 years. In prehistoric caves like those in Lascaux, France, this pigment still clings to the walls, unchanged after millennia. In ancient Egypt, craftsmen created Egyptian blue, the first synthetic pigment in recorded history. By heating crushed limestone, sand, and copper minerals to extreme temperatures, they produced a luminous blue used to decorate statues, tombs, and jewelry. In Mesopotamia, artisans worked with naturally occurring white chalks, deep blacks from carbon soot, and rich yellows from ochre deposits. Each shade carried meaning and symbolism, often tied to religion, trade, or power. Before we move to our today, I want to say that this channel is user-friendly, no offensive content, no misinformation. We explain things with respect, curiosity, and authenticity. In the ancient Andes, cultures like the Nazca extracted a vivid orange-red dye from cochineal insects. It took hundreds of insects to produce just a small amount of pigment, making it more valuable than gold in some trade networks. These colors weren't simply decoration. They were identity, status, and storytelling. Every pigment was a product of skill, resources, and cultural knowledge, passed down through generations. As civilizations grew, so did the complexity of their colors. Trade routes became pathways, not just for spices, silk, and metals, but for rare pigments that carried stories across continents. The Phoenicians of the Mediterranean were masters of a shade known as Tyrian purple. This pigment came from the murex sea snail, found along the coasts of Lebanon. The extraction was laborious. Thousands of snails for a few drops of dye, but the result was a deep, rich purple that did not fade with time or sunlight. Because of its cost, only royalty and high officials could afford garments dyed in it, turning the color into a symbol of authority. In India, indigo dye was cultivated from the leaves of the indigofera plant. Its deep blue was unlike any mineral pigment and became a prized export, reaching Egypt, Rome, and China through ancient trade. Producing indigo required a precise fermentation process, where plant matter was soaked, oxidized, and dried into powder. China developed its own distinctive palette. One of their rare treasures was Han blue, chemically related to Egyptian blue, but with a more intense turquoise hue. It appeared on murals, glazed pottery, and ceremonial objects, and was valued for its endurance against fading. In medieval Europe, artists and manuscript illuminators sought ultramarine, the most expensive pigment of its time. It was made from lapis lazuli, a gemstone mined in the mountains of Afghanistan. Its intense, luminous blue was reserved for the most sacred elements of religious art, such as the robes of the Virgin Mary. Meanwhile, in the Islamic Golden Age, scholars and artisans documented recipes for mixing pigments with binders like gum arabic, allowing colors to be applied on paper, textiles, and ceramics with lasting brilliance. Across Africa, the Yoruba people used indigo dyeing techniques that involved resist patterns, creating complex designs where deep blues contrasted sharply with untouched cloth. In every culture, pigments were more than decoration. They were a blend of science, art, and cultural identity. Each formula was guarded knowledge, passed from master to apprentice, often within families for generations. The Renaissance marked a turning point in how pigments were sourced, prepared, and valued. European artists sought ever more vibrant colors, pushing exploration, trade, and even chemistry forward. One striking pigment was vermilion, made from the mineral cinnabar. Its vivid red was so intense that it dominated frescoes, manuscripts, and paintings. However, cinnabar contained mercury, and prolonged exposure could harm the artisans who used it. Despite the risks, its beauty kept it in high demand for centuries. In the 16th century, the Spanish encountered the cochineal trade in the Americas. The brilliant crimson dye from these small insects quickly became one of the most valuable exports. From the New World, cochineal pigments were so concentrated that they remained vibrant for centuries in European tapestries, royal clothing, and art. During the same period, Venetian painters perfected a deep green, known as verdigris, produced by exposing copper plates to acetic acid. This created an intense hue, but were one prone to reacting with air, changing color over time. In Asia, Japanese artisans developed pigments from natural minerals, such as malachite for green and azurite for blue, applied to screens and scrolls in delicate layers. They also innovated with botanical dyes, blending them into water-based paints that preserved the natural grain of paper and silk. By the 18th century, demand for pigments expanded beyond art into textiles, architecture, and printed books. Scientific study of pigments began to reveal their chemical structures and reactions. This knowledge opened the door to synthetic pigment creation, freeing artists from the limits of nature's palette. Yet, in many rural regions, traditional pigment making survived unchanged. From the ochre mines of Australia, used by Aboriginal peoples, to the chalk and charcoal paints of Scandinavian villages, these ancient methods continued as cultural heritage and local identity. Pigments had travelled far, but the greatest revolution in colour was just about to begin. The Industrial Revolution transformed the world of pigments forever. Advances in chemistry allowed scientists to create synthetic colours that were brighter, cheaper, and more stable than many natural ones. In 1704, Prussian Blue was accidentally discovered in Berlin when an alchemist's experiment went wrong. It became one of the first modern synthetic pigments, quickly adopted by painters, map makers, and textile producers. The 19th century saw an explosion of innovation. William Perkins' 1856 discovery of Mauveine, the first synthetic aniline dye, ushered in the era of chemical colors. Suddenly purple, once reserved for royalty, could be worn by anyone. Cobalt blue, introduced in the early 1800s, offered artists a stable, vivid hue that resisted fading under sunlight. Chrome yellow, made from lead chromate, was brilliant but toxic, eventually replaced by safer alternatives. Artists like Van Gogh, Monet, and Matisse embraced these new pigments to create works filled with intense, luminous color. The Impressionist movement, in particular, was fueled by the expanded palette that industrial chemistry provided. In the 20th century, pigments became vital in industries far beyond art. Titanium white, developed in the 1920s, revolutionized paint production with its unmatched opacity and safety compared to lead-based whites. Today, pigments are designed not only for beauty but for function. They resist UV damage, withstand extreme weather, and in some cases, even change color with temperature or light. Yet despite these advancements, the legacy of ancient pigment making lives on. Archaeologists study the microscopic remains of paints to uncover how past cultures lived and expressed themselves. Artists still turn to natural ochres, indigos, and mineral blues for their timeless qualities. All the information we provide comes from verified historical sources, including books, records, and archaeology. Primary sources for this episode include Color, A Natural History of the Palette by Victoria Finlay. Bright Earth, Art and the Invention of Colour by Philip Ball. Scientific analyses from the Getty Conservation Institute. Archaeological pigment studies from UNESCO archives. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Thrones of Knowledge. And don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified on time. Suggest our next topic in the comments. To help make our journey even better,